Well, hello again. It's Geospatial-Next time. We are rattling through nicely this whole building and executing Geospatial-Next strategy, a step-by-step guide. We're on to step 3, building out your strategy. So we've been through two or three core pieces and frameworks to get to this place. We're now going to dive much more deeply into this whole idea of constructing a strategy. And as I've got in parentheses below, and not a plan. So let's jump in. Well, as ever, we have a lot to cover here, but I wanted to start this talk just by giving a couple of shout outs. The work I'm going to talk about here is really built around a chunk of the ideas from Roger Martin. And if you haven't seen his videos or read his book, How to Win, you should do that. This is a really, really good video that's gone viral about a plan is not a strategy, and you saw that in the title of this talk, so go watch that. Again, as Roger points out, and as I've seen in most of my career, most people think they're building a strategy, they're actually building a plan. So go watch that one, it's really interesting. I'm also one of my favorite books, business books. Don't like many business books, but this one, Crossing the Chasm, is just an exceptional book, and we'll lean on that as well in this and the next talk. So moving forward, the strategy building journey. So to summarize where we've been so far, we went through a phase to start this journey in generating possibilities, and that was a guided journey in building a story. So a small group getting together, walking through those 4 areas: ideation, validation, discovery, business model. Go back to the previous video if you didn't see that, or 2 videos ago actually. The goal there is actually to generate a group of ideas that have some degree of validity to them. They're not just things thrown up against the wall. And again, coming from a small group. The next stage was to go to the strategy choice process. That was to narrow down the possibilities down to essentially 1 ultimately, or at least 2, at least going from sort of a 4 or 5 good possibilities down to 1 that we can focus on. And we measured, there are certain things that we measure these things against, the possibilities to choose that one. Again, that was in the previous talk. What we're going to talk about today is really taken a lot from Roger Martin, this notion of the strategy cascade. And I'm actually going to walk through Roger's got 5 steps in his. I'm actually going to just talk through the 4 of them. And I've kind of adapted some little bits here to sort of my interpretation of what Roger's talking about and what I have seen in the geospatial world, particularly within some of the smaller companies that I've worked with and for. So let's move ahead. So the strategy cascade, it starts out with a winning aspiration. What is our winning aspiration? That's really our goal. And we'll talk in a bit more depth about each of these steps. So we start there. We then talk about where we're going to play, and that's really that notion of a niche. We then start to think about how we will win in our chosen market, and that's our competitive advantage. So that's the 3rd step in this strategy cascade, what we need to build out for the possibility that we've chosen. And then the last piece is what capabilities must we have in place to win. You'll notice that word win runs all the way through this. Not to play, but to win. And that last piece, the capabilities piece, where I will focus in this talk in brief, and in the next talk, which where we'll dive into more depth, is this whole idea of innovation and go to market. So that's where we'll focus our energies. So let's provide a very simple example. I have a goal. My goal is to qualify for the Olympics. This is very, very simplistic. The niche that I think is winnable is I run 100 meters. My competitive advantage is I'm fast. Actually, I used to be fast when I was younger. Not anymore, but anyway, we're just telling a simple story. And then our capabilities, things like training, things like running shoes. So that's our strategy, our 4 core strategy pieces. And as we go through this and as we run our 100-meter races, what we find potentially makes us adjust our strategy. It might be that we find, as an example, that we're actually better suited, given we're fast, but we're not 100 meters fast, that maybe the 200 meters or the 400 meters is a better playing field for us to be in. So then we adjust everything against that change of playing field, that niche that we've chosen to work in, or to run in this case. That would change our training potentially. That would change a lot of other factors in the capabilities area, so that we ultimately we win. So there's a very simple example of how each of those four pieces might fit together in a running example. So hypothesis and success conditions. A strategy is a hypothesis. And let's just define what a hypothesis is. A hypothesis is a supposition or proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. So yes, we had a skeleton when we started to look at the possibilities. We built out, we did some validation, some ideation, we spoke to customers, we looked at the market, we did a bunch of things. We've kind of built out something very simple. Now we're going to dive much more deeply into that, but it's still a hypothesis. No matter how in-depth your strategy is, it's still something that needs to be proven. So that's a hypothesis, and all hypotheses have to be proven or disproven and adjusted as needs be. And again, a strategy is exactly that. So what is it measured against? Well, really it's your success conditions, and we spoke about that in the last talk. What will we need to win? What will it take for us to win? And we've defined a group of success conditions. All of these would have to be true, and if they change over time, then we need to always be measuring against those things, because that would mean we would need to adjust our hypothesis. So we've always got this measure of, as we move forward, of our hypothesis and those factors which need to be true for us to win. So testing and iterating, this is a very big part of Roger Martin's book and talks. Is you really iterate between these two, the playing field that you're on, or the corner of the playing field that you're in, and how to win, your competitive advantage. So you're always iterating through these things and adjusting and moving around until you find that sweet spot, that right place to that you are actually winning. So important point. So let's walk through each of those pieces. And again, I'm going to be really brief here. So what is our winning aspiration? And I always say this, I like that picture. I think that's the Matterhorn. It's kind of a large person, must be a giant on the top of Matterhorn. But mapping out our journey is useless. We don't know our final destination. I mean, we really have to know what is our winning aspiration. Where do we want to get to? What's our end goal? What's our final destination? And again, the analogy of climbing a mountain and getting to the top of that mountain, there's a goal. So secondly, where will we play? An homage to the World Cup that's going on at the moment, and yes, the US did beat Iran. It wasn't the greatest of games, and I hope they beat the Netherlands in the next game, but they lack a bit of attack. But anyway, there's a soccer ball on a playing field. What is your chosen playing field? Now, it could be a corner of a playing field, it could be a complete playing field. This is your niche. And in terms of crossing the chasm, it's your beachhead, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next conversation. But that's what we're talking about as to where to play. So how would we win in our chosen market? This is our competitive advantage. And it's really, what are our potentially winning advantages? And one has to spend time understanding what that looks like. What is it that makes us be in a position where we could potentially win on the chosen playing field that we're on? So defining what your advantages are, your potential competitive advantages, is really critical, and that's the third piece of this this framework. And then the fourth piece, again, I mentioned Roger Martin as a fifth piece, but I'm just going to talk about capabilities. So what capabilities must we have in place to win? And I'll read exactly from something that Roger wrote, actually. So capabilities are those activities that, when performed at the highest level, enable the organization to bring its where to play and how to win choices to life. So, and again, I think in chapter 8 of his book is where he really talks at length about capabilities and choices and things like that. So I think it's chapter 8. But again, I encourage you to read his book. We're actually going to focus on one part of this pie, the capabilities pie, for this series of talks. And again, that's go-to-market, which everyone's desperate to get to very quickly. But we'll put some emphasis on that, and that will be our next talk. So that's actually what we're going to cover in this talk. So I wanted just to walk you through things very quickly. So yes, we've generated a group of possibilities in our smaller groups. Yes, the story is being told by each of those individual groups on the story of those possibilities, guided by those 4 boxes that we've got there. We go through a strategic choice process. We choose that possibility that has the greatest chance of success. We put that possibility through the strategy cascade, which we've just walked through. That's our hypothesis that we're measuring against what has to be true. Ultimately, if it's a product or a solution, we're going to be producing something from this. So we actually have something which we've generated, which is now something that we can sell, critical parts of the go-to-market process. And what we're going to cover next is exactly that. We're going to focus on one part of the capabilities piece of the strategy cascade, and we're going to talk in detail about go-to-market. So that's our next talk. Again, I always welcome your feedback. We'll probably dive more deeply into this whole, I walk through this very quickly. There's a lot of information that's contained within building an in-depth strategy. I've walked through at a very high level. We'll probably break some of this out, color the picture a little bit more in other talks, but that's the sort of guts of where we are building out our strategy. Let's now dive into the capabilities next and talk specifically about this go-to-market piece. So I look forward to doing the next talk. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us on the Geospatial-Next channel. We're focused here on understanding the future of geospatial. That's both how we get to mainstream adoption of the technology and data, and how we start using blockchain and crypto to move things forward. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.